Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License Flight number 18 with service to Imperial Beach, California. We ask that you please fasten your headphones at this time, secure your podcasting device, and remember that if you find yourself levitating at any point in our flight, please make sure to notify a flight attendant before self-diagnosing yourself with brain cancer.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Geoff Kerbis, joined by Rich Inman and Max Singer. How you boys doing today?
California, here we come.
Yeah. We're doing the OC Part 2.
Well, welcome everyone to the TV Pilot's License. This week we are doing a little known, I don't want to call it a hit. We're doing a little known show called John from Cincinnati.
It's a hit, baby.
It from 2007. Rich, you brought us this show. Why?
Okay, so for me, I have a very nice personal connection with the show because I knew very, very few, if almost no one outside my immediate family that actually watched the show. I think I forced it on you guys in college or something like that, or I wouldn't shut up about it because I do truly I love this fucking show, and I think one of the biggest travesties is that it didn't get more seasons. I don't think it got nearly enough appreciation for what it is, and I mean, for anyone listening at home who hasn't watched the show, I would say this probably needs the most context out of any show that we've ever done. You can't just kind of guess this. You can't figure it out from cultural context or references. Nothing references this show.
I can speak to that because I have a confession to make.
Oh no.
Dave
So
Grohl?
this show, John from Cincinnati, came out about 15 years ago. I've had the pleasure of knowing Rich for about 13 years. So John from Cincinnati has existed for the entirety of mine and Rich's friendship. These are facts. And Rich has, in fact, talked about this show a lot in those 13 years of our friendship. And he always described it to me as there's this show that I love from HBO. It didn't have a long run. It's called John from Cincinnati. And it's about this guy, and he might be Jesus, and he shows up in a surfing town, but he's not Jesus. He's John from Cincinnati. And if you know Rich, he used those same tones while talking about this show pretty oftenly.
Yeah, I can picture this conversation perfectly.
Yeah, he speaks in riddles, and you're gonna love it.
I, for about 13 years, have thought that this was a cerebral 30-minute comedy.
Oh, really?
I
have been doing you a disservice.
I know Rich. I know Rich's style of humor. I know the things that him and I bond over and joke about, what made us such good friends. And I have thought that this was a sitcom for the entirety of the time that I have known about it.
No, sir.
And then about a day before I sat down to watch it, a friend of mine reached out and was like, "Oh, it's great that you're doing this show. I just bought David Milch's memoir." And I realized I had no idea what I was about to sit down and watch based on that man's name.
I really would have loved if you just had sat down fully prepared for 30-minute all jokes and then come out the other side almost like a war veteran.
I did. I don't know what I thought I was getting into, but it was not this. I thought I was going to be watching some goofy comedy about surfing Jesus.
Well, for those who don't know what they're coming into as far as this podcast, Max, do you mind telling the folks a little bit about what we're all about?
Absolutely. So here at TV Pilot's License, we break down and analyze the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous and, in some cases, infamous shows. We figure out how these shows came to be and got greenlit. If they were effective pilots and making us want to watch more, if they could be made today. We've got a whole bank of episodes now wherever you get your podcasts. So go ahead, stream what shows you may know and love, or find something new you've never seen before. And if it's your first time flying with us, welcome aboard.
All right, Rich, what is your question of the week?
Yeah. Okay. So since neither of you guys had any idea what the show is, basically going into it, and because I forced you to do this for the holidays, and you'll, for everyone listening at home, you'll see why. Because there's a reason that we did this around Christmas. This is our Christmas episode. We're gonna have three Jews talking about Christmas through the lens of an HBO surf noir show. I would love to know how this, like, what your expectations were going into this, and how this show subverted them, and just like your own experience of trying to figure out what the hell is going on in the show.
That is the headiest question of the week we've ever
Wow.
done.
I don't even know where to start.
No, the headiest one was, how does the ship work?
So I'll give a little peek behind the curtain. When it comes to doing this podcast and the episodes that we choose to do, I like to do a little bit of research beforehand. And this time I chose to just do a little bit of research on the cast that was in the show. And upon seeing whom was in the cast, I had a very similar thought process as Max. I was like, oh, hell yeah, this is going to be witty jokes all over the place. Am I going to get some kick-ass surfing? Hell yeah. Love that. Bring me back to the early 2000s when surfing and skateboarding were the sports of our youth. And then I got slapped in the face by, or basically assaulted by this show and its choice of either doing surf talk or talking in biblical speak. There is no in between. There is no normal person talking on this show. And normally my wife, Alex, likes to watch these shows with me. And she was like sort of disappointed she didn't get to watch this one with me. And I literally told her, I don't know if you should be disappointed. I think you would have been angry and yelling at the TV with me. Very similar to as if I was watching a sporting event. So yeah, that's as much as I'll give.
Yeah, my process is a little different than Jeff's. I like to just go in, take in the show, and then I get all my background info after, because I try not to be like, unless I like know big facts about it already, I try not to like give myself too much of like a preconceived notation. I was fascinated to watch this. I'm actually very excited to talk about this show for so many reasons, but I don't know. I think that it's really interesting to get into an episode of a show that has such a pedigreed background, a person who has done so much leading up to a show, has done so much after a show, and there's this thing in the middle that just didn't quite click, because I mean, we're going to get into it, but like, this is a show from like a veteran cast, a veteran creator, and just something misfired. And I'm really curious to see what we think that is collectively.
Yeah, no, I genuinely, like, although we'll talk about the show, I am so curious about hearing everyone's perspective on the different things that happened in this 53 minutes of television that we watched.
Here's what I
Rich,
think about this show. I do believe that this had and Max, I'm sure you're going to go into this, the extremely unfortunate timing of this show kind of doomed it from the start. And I really do believe that with the enigmatic nature of the show and how many different riddles and like how captivated you are in trying to figure out what the hell is going on, I really equate this to like a Twin Peaks type situation for me, where it's just like I'm gonna sit down and try to figure out what the hell is happening. And I think this is too like ethereal and weird, and like I think it was just like too weird to take place immediately following arguably the most like popular HBO show of from its inception to the day John from Cincinnati comes out. For it to like immediately follow that, it was kind of doomed from the start. But I'm super curious, Max, to see like, or to hear more about like the origins of the show, and you know, we can go into like how doomed it was really.
By the way, whenever Rich refers cryptically to the most famous HBO show of all time, we're referring to Arliss.
Yes.
I thought you were referring to the Minx, R.I.P. But you know,
it's just Minx, Jeff. Drop the. It's cleaner.
Nope. The Minx. We have to refer to it
like the Ohio State University.
Yeah, Rich, I was just about to say that. Well, For those who are curious, let's talk a little bit about a synopsis of the show. In Imperial Beach, California, the dysfunctional Yost family intersects with two new arrivals to the community, a dim but wealthy surfing enthusiast and a man spurned by the Yosts years ago. That's it.
Boy.
Max, let's talk a little bit about how this show was made.
Totally. So today we are going to be talking about John from Cincinnati's pilot episode, His Visit, Day 1, which debuted on June 10th, 2007. This show is a two-hander from the minds of David Milch and Kem Num. We'll talk a little bit about Num first because there's not quite as much there, but Num is a surf noir author, which would also make badass knuckle tattoos. And Num is probably best known for his 1984 debut novel, Tapping the Source, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, but more importantly, was the basis for the 1991 film Point Break.
Yeah!
And Num later goes on to become a TV writer. He works in the writer's room for the third and final season of Deadwood, which is another David Milch show. Now, David Milch is a massive name in television from the 1980s through today, but he wasn't always a TV writer. He actually started off as an English and literature professor at Yale, his alma mater. During his undergrad time at Yale, he was actually fraternity brothers in Phi Beta Kappa with future President George W. Bush, and went on to receive his master's in fine arts from the Iowa Writers Workshop. So while he's working as a literature professor at Yale, Milch writes a spec script for the TV show Hill Street Blues, and it ends up making its way to people at Hill Street, and he gets brought on as a story editor. Milch's spec script ends up becoming an actual episode of the show. It is the premiere of season 3, and that episode is called Trial by Fury, and actually goes on to win Milch a Primetime Emmy for outstanding writing for a drama series.
Whoa.
So his spec script ends up netting him an Emmy Award. He spends 5 years at Hill Street Blues, where he ends up becoming an executive story editor and eventually an executive producer on the series. Post Hill Street, he goes on to co-create NYPD Blue, where he's their executive producer for the show's first 7 seasons. He spends a lot of time at CBS in the 90s doing cop dramas for them. He creates 2 lesser-known shows for CBS called Brooklyn South and Big Apple. But then in 2004, he creates a show over at HBO called Deadwood, which he also writes the majority of its entire 3-season run. Deadwood, if you're not familiar, revolutionizes TV writing as we know it in the early 2000s. It is one of the first shows that I guess has that sort of like not theatrical, not television style of dialogue. It's written as if people in the 1870s in the Badlands of South Dakota talk. It's incredibly crass. It's incredibly overlapping. And it's unceremoniously canceled by HBO after 3 seasons, but its legacy lives on. It's considered to be one of the best TV shows of all time. Won a ton of Emmy Awards and was nominated for more in its run. But now, Milch basically has a blank check to do whatever he wants at HBO. And that takes us to John from Cincinnati.
Let's see what he does with that blank check.
And it's interesting because when asked in interviews what John from Cincinnati is about, Milch has responded, it is about itself, and has also more or less acknowledged that he doesn't think you could pinpoint the show as being about any one thing. It draws on Kem Num's surf noir genre as sort of a tone and world for it. It deals a lot with Milch's own issues with substance abuse and how that affects him and the people around him. He's kind of said it's about a family of surfers who've become more and more disassociated from themselves and from good surfing. They were all champions, and they are in one way or another alienated and loaded. He's also described as being post 9/11 America, basically this response from the great beyond as to where we are headed as a humanity. So between that and him being friends with George W. Bush, there's a lot of 9/11 ties to this show.
Wait,
being friends with George W. Bush. Whoa,
they were fraternity brothers.
I'm seeing a little bit of a trend of post 9/11 America takes place only in California, according to our podcast with the OC and then John from Cincinnati.
Dave, it's George calling. I'm calling from the White House. I just watched that new show. I just watched the new pilot you just put up, John from Cincinnati. And I gotta say, you guys called, you have exactly my view on people coming across the border from Mexico that I was expecting from a Gale man.
Oh my god.
And now we're going to talk about the thing that Rich has alluded to, which is the timing of this show. Milch, obviously, again, blank check, coming off Deadwood, could do what he wants. This pilot gets slotted to premiere immediately following the series finale of The Sopranos. One, massive shoes to fill. But two, it's been 15 years, so I'm just going to say it. If you have not seen the finale of The Sopranos, there is a sudden blackout to end the show where no sound occurs, a long beat, and then the credits roll. When that episode premiered, millions of Americans called their cable companies thinking that something was wrong with their cable packages, satellite dishes, so on and so forth.
It was a miracle.
And so you basically have this entire audience that you're expecting to lead into your show who all think that their cable box is broken, and now you have to premiere your show. It is the most daunting time slot that you could have, but also the worst circumstances to lead directly into your show.
So I was going to save this for the legacy portion, but if anyone's curious, what percentage of audience dropped off between the 11.9 million people that watched the series finale of The Sopranos and the premiere of John from Cincinnati? What if I told you only 28% of that audience stayed back?
Oh my God.
And that's insane to me, because it's like Deadwood runs from 04 to 06, and it's getting nominated for the same thing as Sopranos. It's in that same time slot. It's like people watch these shows together for a couple of years, and it's like it's probably the same, prestige TV lovers. It's the same adult audience, and you have Milch's new show. So I don't understand where that disconnect happened. How I don't know if it's a marketing thing. I don't know if there was just lack of interest.
I have a theory.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you're familiar with how they film things like Marvel movies right now, you know that the cast is basically in the dark about what happens because they don't want things to influence how they react in real time to scenes. They don't want the entire thing is basically, I want to protect any spoilers from happening, period. Which is ridiculous because even if there are spoilers and stuff like that, people are still going to go watch the movie. But with a spoiler protective thing in mind, my guess is that very few people outside of the cast and production crew knew how The Sopranos was going to end. And I think what ended up happening is that the programmers for this did not know that there was just going to be a blackout at the end of The Sopranos to basically withhold information from leaking online and stuff like that. So what I think happened is that they couldn't plan for this. I think they were coming in hard with John from Cincinnati right after this for a purpose, because they wanted people to cross over, come see the new David Milch thing. It's like, hey, you guys remember Deadwood, right? You love Deadwood. Well, here's the new Deadwood. And I really do think that they wanted this to succeed really well, but I think very few people at HBO or people who were doing the programming actually knew how this is going to end.
I know this episode is not about The Sopranos, but I can't help but think, could you imagine if Twitter existed when The Sopranos finale happened? And we would just have...
we could make it about The Sopranos.
Yeah,
I'm holding this, oral history written by Michael Imperioli and Steve
We would
Sciarippa
just have,
here.
Elon Musk would just be complaining and, doing cryptic memes. Everyone would just be saying, I don't know what the hashtag would be. Would it be Blackout? Would it be Sopranos? Who knows? Maybe we'll talk about that when we finally do Max's dream episode of The Sopranos. But with all of that background, you guys want to just jump into...
Let's do it.
Let's jump into that wave.
Let's hang 10, baby.
All of us are obviously surfers. So we get an intro into the show with Lord Johnny Appleseed. I thought this intro to the episode was actually super enlightening because on face value, you would assume that this show is entirely about surfing. Right? They show us a lot of clips of surfing, Imperial Beach as a whole. But as the intro goes further in, we start to get introduced to different elements, like migration issues, drugs as a whole, all to this folk song in the background of sorts.
Yeah, it's interesting that a show like this would just launch immediately into its opening credits. I feel like maybe we're just a little more accustomed to having these cold opens or
Yeah.
having a little bit of time to like set up almost a prologue for your pilot, but this just throws you into the credits. Like, I mean, in a way, it sort of washes over you. You get to like let that sink in. You get some Joe Strummer vocals like coming into picture here, but it is interesting that you start this episode off before you actually meet any characters.
Yeah, it definitely, it was an interesting way to open the episode. I love the song choice, first of all. I think that's a great song for this, like now knowing what the, I say knowing with the gigantic air quotes because I think no one knows what this is about. It's sort of like the meaning of life. We all ponder and we all say to each other what we think it is, but we don't really know. But
Well, I mean,
instant, yeah,
overall, the music for this show rips. I
yeah,
really
for
think,
sure,
yeah,
100%.
and it somehow even gets better like over like the course of the season, but like because you only get like 2 or 3 songs throughout this entire like hour-long episode, but it really becomes like part of the vibe. Like it seems like the music choices are very thoughtful. It feels very like unique and really part of the landscape, and not necessarily like, we're gonna throw a popular song in here to like keep people's attention or something like that. It is, I don't know, I think they just do a really good job of it. My mission for the rest of this episode is to make sure people actually watch all 10 episodes of the show.
Oh no, we got a
Oh, no.
missionary.
Oh no.
An evangelist,
actually-
as it were.
Would you say
this
that's
show,
your
though-
position, Rich? Or
Yeah, I'm in the missionary position.
Bye,
of the three
everyone.
of us.
Bye.
This show is actually another first for HBO, though. This has never been done by HBO before. After the opening credits, we get a commercial break, and we see a Matthew McConaughey Lincoln commercial.
Oh, Max, I am so glad you said that because instantly when I saw the Lincoln roll up to the beach, I was disappointed when Luke Perry stepped out and not Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, you see a man surfing on the water,
Because-
the cool blue waves.
You know that this precedes the Lincoln commercials by like 8 or 9
No,
years, right?
no.
Shut up!
Matthew McConaughey has always been the Lincoln spokesperson, always, since
Abraham.
the beginning of time. Since the beginning.
Since it was founded by Abraham Lincoln.
But, like, also, I would have loved, like, this is me just, like, retconning this entire show, but Matthew McConaughey, if you don't know and you have never seen one of these Lincoln commercials, he just speaks in riddles and rhymes.
He does.
Him and John Monad speaking in riddles to each other after he steps out of a car would have been just, like, wonderful for me.
We wouldn't
and I
have
really
even
would have
gotten
loved
10
it.
full episodes if they did that.
Yeah,
No, we would have gotten 20.
Matthew McConaughey could have done John from Cincinnati, but specifically the character of John Monad, not even the actor Austin Nichols, could not have done Magic Mike.
It's the square is a rectangle, but not all rectangles are squares, I see. But after we see Link, who is played by Luke Perry, roll up, obviously a well-to-do guy, watching Mitch Yost, played by Bruce Greenwood, surfing, and like that's one of the things I will one of the first things that I want to give the show really big credit on is filming surfing is really, really difficult. Filming surfing well is extremely difficult because it's a very intricate sport. There's a lot of detail that's associated with it. And from the beginning of this scene, they do such a great job of filming this man who was seen as one of the top surfers of all time. And we soon learn he's out of the game. He doesn't even like surfing in public anymore. You can instantly tell the credibility of like, Mitch Yost is this legend, and Mitch needs to get back into it as a whole.
He's got to get back in the game.
Yeah, he's got to get back in the game, as John Monad tells us. But anything else that you guys got from this opening scene of just seeing the Mitch being a surfer? We're introduced to this mysterious figure of John, and we instantly know that Link is sort of a dickhead.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dudes in Southern California who just kind of come up over your shoulder and say the end is near. So I mean,
Yeah, I had that happen 3 times while I was getting coffee this morning. That's not that crazy.
Yeah, and the other thing that we should probably mention is when Mitch is just like getting cleaned up from surfing and all this, he has this what he deems a hallucination, right? We get our first instance of Mitch hovering, a few inches off the ground, which I would say is strange. For sure.
I would agree with you.
But if you were to, it actually reminded me. I don't know if you guys saw. Forget the name of the movie, but it was a Disney movie where it was like Superhero High or something like that, and they had the people who had the underwhelming superpowers, and like just telling.
Are you talking about Sky High?
Yes, I'm talking about Sky High. In Sky High, they had people who had underwhelming superpowers, and I could very easily see Mitch be like, "Yeah, I can levitate like 3 inches off of the ground. That's it. That's my superpower."
I mean, yeah. So here's the thing too. Like, obviously, this is going to become. He notices it immediately. It's already like an extremely weird thing for this to be happening. Like, but also no one else is around to see it. And this is where I think you have. I think there were actually. It was kind of a disservice to put the credits before this as like a cold open.
Yeah,
you already have a lot of exposition with Luke Perry's characters talking about, like, you know, how he's trying to sign Sean even against like Mitch's wishes and everything. Sean is the grandson who's a surfing prodigy, and you start to get a feeling that, like, you know, John literally came out from nowhere. He is going to be you can see immediately that having John's presence is already going to shape this family in an extremely bizarre way. And you get his first miracle like a minute into the show. Like, it is, I don't know, I think it's a great way to start it off. I don't know why they didn't just put the credits immediately following that.
The one issue I have with this opening scene, though, is while you have characters talking about Mitch to make it clear that like Mitch is our main guy here, we don't you don't need to over explain things, but like you don't really get any explanation as to like who we're seeing. And then we also spend a lot of time with Luke Perry, who we don't see really again
until the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And even then, it's only on like the other side of a phone call, jumping ahead a little bit there. And so it's just interesting that you spend so much of your opening beats with a character who, at least for the sake of the pilot, I don't know what his role is moving forward. But you spend so much time with Link to then not get really anything else from him here.
It seemed like a marketing choice.
I very much was like, oh, cool. Like, Luke Perry's going to be in a lot of this show. And then he wasn't. And I was sort of like, why? We get introduced to the rest of the Yost family, though, sort of in like an interesting way. Like, while Mitch is out surfing, we see that Sean Yost, the grandson of the Yost family, right, is being watched by his grandmother, Sissy, which is, what a name. Love that name. And also, while Sissy is watching, there's another woman watching who we have no idea whom she is, right? At this point in time of the show, we learn that she's Deborah. She works definitely hand in hand with Link. But we're starting to get, like, a very vague idea of who our main characters are within this episode, or who this episode is going to revolve around as a whole. But from here, I believe we go to the motel for the first time. We
meet Butchie.
Yeah, we meet Butchie. And it's definitely, Butchie's character is one that I'm like very curious about, because he seems like he's supposed to be a center of comedy. But at the same time, there are so many dark notes that like are a part of this character that had me like, like, I don't know how to feel about Butchie as a whole. Rich, I'd love to hear, what are your thoughts about like our introduction to Butchie in the broken down Volkswagen as a whole?
So, like a little bit earlier, you get Luke Perry's character, Link, talking about how he's not going to let happen to Mitch. I'm sorry, what happened to Sean, the young surfing prodigy? What happens to Butchie? And you know, Butchie, you immediately get as he's squatting in a motel in Imperial Beach. Already a horrifying situation that he's in. You see him actively, like, you know, slamming doors and like throwing shit around the apartment. He is trying to tie off to, he's like very clearly a heroin addict. He references later in the episode that he's like dope sick and stuff like that. He is, you know, despite him being like seemingly like an irretrievable person, he's going to have the ability to reconnect with his son, who also gives him shit, which is, you know, probably a little bit too much for an actual 13-year-old to handle. But you see him basically like at his lowest while still trying to be a relatively good dad. And you know, it's really disheartening. It's really sad. It is not it is a difficult character to play, honestly, because it's someone who quote unquote revolutionized surfing. You get that from several different characters of like, you know, Butchie's technique as a surfer became like it just changed the sport as itself. I don't know what that means. And I guess it's in the same way that like Tony Hawk revolutionized skateboarding. Even I don't know what that means.
But Butchie's being given lifelines too. They even explain the character of Meyer Dickstein, who we meet, who's one of the managers at the motel, played by the great character actor Willie Garson, rest in peace, who he's basically giving Butchie this like squatter's pass because he's like such a surfing enthusiast. And it's like, Butchie has people in his camp who maybe don't know quite how to help him, but want to do what they can, even just making sure he has a roof over his head. So, I mean, this is a character who is at his lowest, but like there are people who want to make him redeemable, who want to support him. So you know that there has to be something there within him, even if we're not seeing it yet in this pilot.
Yeah, we also were introduced to Luis Guzman by this point in time, and like I will say that
the hero of Greendale Community College.
the chemistry between Willie Garson and Luis Guzman in the show is actually a real bright spot for the show as a whole. And we also, the other thing we're introduced to is like, hey, this motel is under new ownership by this mysterious figure. We have no idea who they are, but we know that they are coming. And the motel has to be gotten ready. And that's one of Butchie, while like they're trying to take care of him, he's also a nuisance in this situation. He's not supposed to be there. Like it's supposed to be completely, you know, evacuated as a whole. And I did the scene between Butchie and Sean, of Sean like not seeing his dad for 6 months. That was like one of the conversation there. It is such a difficult character to play, as you said, Rich, but Brian Van Holt does such a good job as like showing that struggle of the dad that wants to be there, but also has so much going on in his life that he brought upon himself. I'm being very honest, but addiction is addiction. It is a disease, and watching someone go through that while also trying to juggle a million things is always going to be very difficult to watch.
Yeah, I you know, if I was a biblical scholar, I'm positive that there's someone that this could be an allegory to who JC helps out through doing some air quotes on that one. There's definitely a feeling of like different lost souls and like the like different troubled people, but Butchie essentially being like a major talent who has a troubled existence and is in the process of being rescued by John. I think there someone can write in or something who knows anything more about the Bible than 3 Jews, but I would love to know who this is like actually an allegory for, or a reference to.
Yeah, we have a really good idea of the first edition. The second edition we don't know too much about. Over
the second book, The Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah, that one is the way over our heads.
Release the Snyder cut of the Bible.
Let's push forward a little bit though,
okay,
because a little bit more starts to happen. John meets Vietnam Joe, and we only get a little bit of Vietnam Joe, but we start to learn
For the record, this is the character's credited name. We're not just calling this guy Vietnam Joe. That's his actual title.
But like for he might get like 3 minutes of screen time overall, but Vietnam Joe does a really great job as a tool of like understanding sort of the mysterious nature of John as a whole. Like he's like, hey, I need $50. Magically, John pulls out exactly $50 out of his pocket. Then we start to get a better idea of like John not really, like, I don't want to say he doesn't understand the English language, but like the way he speaks as a whole is super duper interesting because he keeps on repeating some things I know and some things I don't.
Mm-hmm.
That is a continued phrase throughout the entirety of this episode. I was considering for the opening just repeating one of you for the first 5 minutes of this episode.
That's very
But
funny.
I decided we are a podcast. People would not understand the joke.
People would not understand we are a podcast.
Yeah. But like anything you guys got from like meeting Vietnam Joe, seeing a character who is very different than some of the other characters that we've met.
Vietnam Joe is a good tool for exploring the world beyond the Yost family that we're in. This town of Imperial Beach is written as being 10 miles north of the Mexican border in Southern California. And so we see some of the general politics at play here and like how this community outside of the surf world interacts and goes about their day. So I do think that he, at least in this episode, serves almost as like a plot device more than a character. Because, I mean, one, he literally shepherds our protagonist into town and gets him where he needs to be. But also, like, he just gives you that background on Imperial that otherwise might have been a little bit harder to get out there.
Yeah, and Imperial Beach is a real place. I do want to say that. And I think that motel is actually real. I think that is like a real motel that they rented out for filming here.
Oh, we should have recorded the podcast from there.
I agree with you. Max and I can drive. Jeff, will see you in 3 days.
Yeah, hitch a ride to the Vietnam vet.
Yeah. Oh my god. Well, as John is getting a ride from Joe, we get introduced to a little bit more of the dynamic of the Yost family via Sean, right? Sean is the surfing prodigy as well, which seems to run within the Yost family. But he wants to go to this surfing tournament in Huntington Beach against the orders of Mitch. Who almost just seems like this, it's Mitch's word or the highway in this instance. But the dynamic between Sissy, Mitch, you throw in Kai, who just randomly is there and is like, I don't know if Kai is Sean's mom or what her relationship is with that family, but it's very mysterious and odd.
Yeah.
The dynamic between this family is screwed. Like, let's just call it spade. I will
also say the one thing that basically makes this family so angry, like the one divisive point, is surfing. And they decided to stay in Imperial Beach and run a surf shop. For Mitch to like really hate his family being involved in surfing, he completely surrounded himself with it every single day. I do not understand that's the one thing from this pilot that really threw me. Like, they're basically, I guess you can't stay away from it. I don't know. I've never surfed. I'm sure people who like have an absolute obsession with it can't stay away from it. They can't move too far from the beach.
This scene with the surf shop and the parallel ongoing scene of Shawnee and Butch together in the motel, you really get a feel for all the different dynamics between the family members here. Mitch seems to feel this guilt over surfing and what it's done to his family. Butchie getting strung out from getting that taste of glory. It seems like fame got to him. It led him down a dark path. His resentment towards this character of Link, played by Luke Perry, and what he's done to his family, maybe blaming Link for creating this rift here, versus, Sissy wanting to just see Shawnee succeed. The sins of the father are not that of the son, so on and so forth.
Wow.
The Butchie Shawnee scene to me is really tough to watch because you're watching this father-son dynamic while Butchie is in the throes of being strung out.
Yeah. And
there's a Milch quote from a New York Times piece on the creation of this show. This is a piece from back in 2006 where Milch talks about addiction in here. And he says that every time a junkie walks into a new environment, he looks around and says, what are the specific items of the indictment? And to me, that's sort of saying that it's like,
oh, wow.
You always feel like people are coming at you, blaming you. There's always, there's always things that are being pushed as being your fault, sense of guilt. And like seeing the anger he has about shoddy surfing because of how he feels about himself and his life. It's just like you said, how everything revolves around surfing, but like it's more than surfing. Like surfing's the thing, but it's not the thing.
It's making the leap from a hobby to being part of a capitalistic system around surfing. I think what ended up happening is, I mean, if you can extrapolate from enigmatic dialogue of what Link could have done to Butchie when he was younger, and Link, I mean, I really don't think Link is that bad of a person. I think Link was being a manager who let themselves be catering to Butchie's inner like demons and everything. And I think what ends up happening is Butchie was going to go down this route anyways. It's just that he had more money from being a professional surfer.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's enablers that we don't see here. And these scenes, like these two scenes in the motel or the surf shop, this is the stuff that is really interesting to me here. There is a really powerful family drama in this show. It's just there's all of the loopy speak and the supernatural. And there's like all these other things here that you're kind of going like, huh, what's happening?
Yeah,
there's like a really good family story here.
Totally. There's a lot of extra stuff, right? Like that just I think if this was truly just about the Yost family and then we added in like a few other characters, like maybe 3, right? Like have it be the Yosts are I can't do math right now, the main 4, and then you have 2 other characters that are part of the main cast. And then you might have some other storylines that come in here and there, but we don't need to meet all of them in this pilot episode. We can really get a good understanding of everything shitty that's happening with the Yost family in the beginning. I do want to push us forward a little bit.
Yeah.
We don't have all day.
We're running longer than a Bible book right now.
The Snyder Cut version.
But, like, I want to talk quickly about, after the Yost disagreement in the surf shop, we are told Sissy just disobeys Mitch. And I use disobey very lightly because she makes a decision for herself and says, Sean, you're going to this surfing tournament. Go speak with Bill. Bill's going to drive you there. This is the first time we've ever done this, and Max, I know you made fun of me for ever saying that, but first time we've had an actor in 2 consecutive episodes of TV shows because we have Ed O'Neill as Bill. I do want to say Bill's character is so intriguing to me. We do get the second miracle, but I've never seen Ed O'Neill play like this quiet, like taken aback character.
Yeah,
he's a dork.
And it was so interesting to me. It like the choices he made, I was just like, okay, like what happened? Because they didn't just get Ed O'Neill to be this guy. They got Ed O'Neill because this is a layered human being who we might see outbursts, but like something happened that made him into the man he is.
This is the Ed O'Neill Emmy role. Like this is the part that Ed O'Neill took because it's break. But no, it's that thing where an actor takes a part that's such a break from type that it gets them praise and awards and it launches them into a new part of their career. And little did he know that 2 years later he was going to get that part
for being like a curmudgeonly older dad figure again.
For being himself. Ed O'Neill played Ed O'Neill.
No, 2 years later he plays senior version of Al Bundy and he gets all this praise heaped on him. But, like, it's just fascinating to see the turn that Ed O'Neill is attempting to take with this part.
I really liked it. I this is something that subverts my own expectations of what I think would, of who I think would be drawn to a show like this. I was just listening to an interview of Mark Maron, literally yesterday, about one of the new movies that he's in, where he plays, like, a very quiet, reserved, like, Texan guy. He's like, this is something I had to have several calls with the director asking, do you really want me for this? Is this really like, because the actor, the director, or the casting team sees something a little bit deeper in them. And I don't know, it's so different from anything Ed O'Neill has done prior.
The
or
other
since.
thing here, and then we'll move on, is that this character, he's clearly dealing with trauma and PTSD. He talks about having a pain diagnosis from the VA. We find out not too long after that he was involved with the police department here. And it's interesting to see that Milch's background from Hill Street Blues to NYPD Blue to his other cop dramas, that he would then write someone who was involved in that world and seeing almost like the after effects
Yeah,
of it. This is a guy who like spent 15 years writing the police as these like action heroes, and now we're seeing another side to that from Milch. So it's curious to see what got him from NYPD Blue to Bill in John from Cincinnati.
Yeah, we do have our second miracle. I do want to just mention it really quickly. There is a bird, Zippy. Bill owns the bird, and then we find out that Zippy dies, and then Zippy, after being touched by a Yost, Sean, arises from the dead, which is super interesting. You can tell Bill is entirely spooked by the idea of it, but there's something there that has to be kept in mind. First miracle by Mitch, second miracle by Sean. But let's talk a little bit about what comes next. John Monad meets Butchie. And this is such an interesting, we get a little bit more of a piece of who John is as a human being, right? I don't want to call it a miracle, but John goes into his pockets and produces $2,300 that Mitch has been looking for, or Butchie has been looking for. And then they decide, what made Butchie decide that John was going to be a surfing prodigy? Because I missed that interaction as a whole, but Butchie almost seemed dead on, like, oh, John is my big break. This is what's going to get me back in the good graces of the surfing world as a whole.
He just keeps repeating everything that Butchie says about surfing and then producing an MX Platinum card.
Yeah, that really is it. And also, like, he mistakenly thinks that he's from the agency that's trying to get him his, like, accident, like, lawsuit insurance money or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was, you know, he was someone that was calling some guy named Freddie over and over and over in these scenes coming from the motel, and mistakes John as someone who like as part of the people that owe him money. And what essentially that does too is, like, John becomes someone who is alleviating stress from Butchie. He's alleviating, like, anger from him. He like essentially removed the debts of someone Butchie was furious with, and you know, I don't think you hear from the people that actually owed him money again. Like, you know, John is going to be the personal, not necessarily savior, but he's definitely going to be someone who is helping this family along in so many different ways. And I think Butchie is the person that has the most pain, like through the different branches of the family, and the fact that he's there with him, I think is you know, it's indicative of, like, how he's going to help that family as a whole, like, coming from the center of the most pain.
There's an interesting moment in here, though, where John is repeating all of, like, Butchie's enthusiastic moments, and then he drops to his knees in front of Butchie's, basically in, like, a laid out prayer. And Butchie gets really freaked out. And I'm curious as to, like, what you guys think this moment is.
Yeah, it is so intriguing, right? Because the entire character of John is meant to be this mysterious figure, right? Like this unexplainable entity that is able to produce things when they are needed to be produced, able to act in ways that the moment necessitates. But it was just one of those, I mean, wouldn't y'all be freaked out if someone just started praying in front of you and acting like you were this greater entity as a whole?
Well, yeah, I think there's also, I have to imagine someone who is like a generational talent in something as well, has a lot of bizarre interactions with people who, you know, and I think he was like, maybe he had a savior complex at a certain particular point of being someone who's so good at one particular thing that everyone else kind of capitulates toward them, or like has to be like, you know, I'm positive that people who really, really love basketball would freak the hell out if they saw LeBron James in person or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would do something so crazy as to, like, you know, get on their knees and you know, essentially like be submissive to that person. But I really think I think maybe, and I just love that there's so many open-ended things in this pilot. This is why I'm like, watch all 10. You gotta watch all 10.
Because Butchie has a poster of himself from his glory days in his drug den motel room. He has a Butchie the Beast poster, like a poster that was probably in the bedrooms of how many kids throughout Southern California in his heyday. So I do think, maybe there was some sort of complex he had about himself, and now he's like dealing with that inner demon as well. I don't know. It's just a very interesting moment there, how like the shift happens really quick.
It's also such an interesting juxtaposition because you have the way that John behaves around Butchie, but then very soon after you see how some of the other people in his life, like Kai, treat Butchie as this nuisance as a whole, and like this human being that is just a pest in general. You see how some of the other characters, like the folks that are working at the motel, they help Butchie, but they almost keep their distance away from him, like trying to be these guides while also not interfering as much as possible. It's for John to be really that first character to interact and give him that essence of what it once was, probably is very shocking and something that he's not used to anymore.
He's the only character in the show that Butchie hasn't let down in the past, like before the show started.
Oh, very interesting take. So I want to go to, there's like 10 minutes of the show where a lot of stuff happens. But I thought it was probably the most interesting 10 minutes of the show. We have Sissy going to Target, or excuse me, Costco. But they call it Janoco for some reason, because Costco definitely did not want to have any participation in this.
They did not make Costco look like a fun place to be.
We have
it's not.
We have Butchie and Mitch get in an argument over the phone and then get in a physical altercation within 5 minutes of each other. We have Bill and Sean trying to drive to Huntington and then mysteriously get a flat tire. And then we also meet Mr. Cunningham, who attempts within all this period of time to get so emotionally distressed that he attempts to kill himself in all of this.
And let's give like a 2-second background on this. Mr. Cunningham is a lottery winner from Imperial Beach, and it is revealed that he was struck in the head by Butchie as a 12-year-old
with a broom.
With a broom, where the soft part of the broom, like the actual bristle part, fell off. So basically, he got smacked in the head with like a broom handle by Butchie, and like essentially the result of that is he has epilepsy and now has like a grudge against him, and he is the new purchaser of the Imperial Beach Motel.
Which it's also very briefly, like a blink and you miss it reveal his history to the motel itself. Which is that Barry Cunningham reveals that as a child he was sexually assaulted in one of those motel rooms. So he has basically won the lottery and come back to Imperial Beach looking for, I guess for lack of a better word, a sense of revenge against those in the town who wronged him in his youth.
I think he mentions he's going to just level the motel.
He's gonna raise the motel. He's going to just erase it from the face of the
earth. I gotta be honest, for anyone with that type of trauma, I would totally get what a great thing to do. It also it's very reminiscent of like the end of Fight Club or something like that. It's just like destroy the thing that hurt you, and I think that's there is kind of a beauty to it, and also. You can't really tell from this scene if he knew that Butchie was already there, but he wanted to destroy the motel no matter what. So he had two past things to settle by destroying that motel.
And then an interesting character revelation here. Barry Cunningham comes into this scene with a gun on his hip, basically saying that he was told that when you win the lottery, you need to be armed because people will come after you and try to rob you. So there's also like a real paranoia here, but we are getting a gun reveal in a very heated situation that is then shockingly turned on himself, and Mayor Dickstein has to wrangle out of his hands really quickly to prevent Barry from killing himself in the parking lot of the motel.
it's a wild scene.
You have everyone showing up in the motel at that exact moment too. The entire Yost family is there except for Sissy. Like Bill and Sean somehow wind up inside the motel. Like
they have to just pull off the road because of the flat tire.
Everyone's drawn to that particular moment, which I thought was very fascinating. It was an interesting piece of the story flow.
Yeah, it definitely was this, like, all of the stuff that happened. Like, we could dive into the politics of the Sissy at Janoko situation and the jokes that happened there and that entire scene. We could dive into seeing Bill and, like, dealing with his trauma of being a police, part of the police, and now dealing with the real life and almost being scared of being outside of his own home.
Mm-hmm.
But this scene ends with a man nearly tries to kill himself and doesn't, and we have to go to the police station to get Sissy out of custody as a whole.
Should just say really quick, we've touched upon this. Sissy goes to not Costco to buy a camera for Mitch because he wants to get photographic proof of his feet off of the floor. We also skipped over this, but Mitch believes that he might have a brain tumor, which is why he's hallucinating himself floating. He basically says brain cancer as a punchline in a scene at one point. Very, very dark joke. But while there, Sissy ends up being escorted out by the police after knocking over a display of toilet paper, getting into a disagreement with a store employee. Because apparently that is an arrestable offense.
Yes. You know, causing drama down at the Costco is going to get you thrown in jail for a day or two.
I did really find the police station to be interesting because we found Bill almost snapped back into form, right? Being this head figure at the police station. He's really disappointed how things look. He's almost like coming out of that retirement phase as a whole. Butch and Mitch sort of come to an agreement of like, hey, we have to be okay with each other, and like, Mitch, I know you don't trust John, but I do. And we also find Mitch gets confirmation that he doesn't have brain cancer because he's seen floating by Butch.
I think that reveal of Mitch levitating in front of Butchie was like, number one, like a really important reconciliation moment from how much tension and anger there is throughout the entire episode up until this point between them. And I think it was basically both of them letting go of, hey, we need to stop fighting over things that happened in the past and focus our attention on raising Sean to be like an actual decent man. Because Sean, the only person who's like really helping Sean is his grandmother Sissy, who's now in jail, and also John, who keeps doing dance moves at him, which is it's like a very like weird connection moment. It's like it was weird. It was like a pure soul.
He's just doing the Michael Jackson hand pop out move over and over and over, which again I have seen a lot of people just do in Southern California. This is not a weird. This is not a monad. Everyone does that in SoCal.
Oh, Max, did you think the guy in front of Grauman's Chinese Theater, do you think that's really Michael Jackson?
Yeah, he's trying to connect with the people. What do you say?
Oh, buddy.
Oh, no.
He died soon after John from Cincinnati came out.
R.I.P. Michael Jackson, you would have loved John from Cincinnati.
So let's finish up this episode and talk about the end of this episode, because a couple of things happen. I want to talk about what we see happen with Mr. Cunningham after all of this stuff. We see him in this beautiful beachside mansion, sitting next to a teddy bear, drinking wine. He's being looked over.
He's drinking wine, not the teddy bear, by the way.
Yeah, the teddy bear.
But
the teddy bear then proceeds to go surfing. According to Mr. Cunningham. And this was like another instance of where you see like, hey, something's really up with this guy. Like, he's definitely not all there. And we not only, like, I almost find him slightly terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Because he isn't all there. He has all of these resources, and he will involve himself, and he will put harm to himself in order to hurt other people as well. But then we get this really fun final scene of John, Mitch, Butch, and Sean all go surfing. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's like this everything's going to be okay moment,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels like an everything's going to be okay.
It
We get
does.
one of my favorite lines of Butch saying, somebody call an ambulance because Johnny Monad put that wave in the ICU.
Yeah, the dialogue
which...
there wasn't amazing. You can see why they wanted everything to be more cryptic and riddles, because the true dialogue is a little weird.
Yeah, and then, through all this, Deborah sees that Sean is not at Huntington while Link is there
Mm-hmm.
to go and hopefully sign Sean.
Yeah.
And we get to see that John is amazing at surfing. He just picks it up.
He picked it up.
After, without, to our knowledge, no previous experience surfing. And yeah, it's sort of, that's how the episode ends. Do you guys have any more comments on that final scene?
I like that we end with family here. I like that we see maybe Mitch letting go of some of his surfing resentment and being able to like bond over it with family. I like that he finally gets to watch his grandson and how good he is in person after really only seeing his like surf like mixtape that he's using to try and get sponsorships. But I also think it's important that we see that Butchie still has it. I think it's really important that Mitch gets to watch two generations of his family bond over a wave and seeing like a father-son moment between Butchie and Shawnee, and that both of them still have this gift in them, and hopefully that'll bring Mitch back into the fold as well. And I'm glad that we do end on a hopeful note in what is otherwise a fairly bleak pilot.
Yeah. He and I think the first thing that John says is Mitch Yost needs to get back in the game, and I think where you leave the family is Mitch deciding to get back in the game. But you also get and I put this in the things we love category, but okay, so you also get a pretty important thing here of the reveal that John can hear people talk to themselves very quietly from a long distance away. Bill is like, I got my eye on you, John. Like, we're going to figure out what is wrong with you, or you're going to figure out what your motives are or whatever. And then you can hear John, while actively like surfing on a wave, like when he's supposed to be focusing, looking at Bill right in the eyes from the water from a very long distance away. He's like, I got my eyes on you, Bill. And that's another big part of it. But I mean, okay, I'm gonna jump right into the things we love, because I need to talk about this particular scene, because the stranglehold that this particular line had on my family for a really long time was okay. So Butchie at one point says, "How does that sound, John?" When he's encouraging John to fake a leg cramp or something like that so he can get out of surfing. John turns around and says, "It sounds Butchie." It's like it's the dumbest line. It's so stupid, but I think what really kept me in this show, because I don't have a lot of like interest normally in like extreme weird enigmatic fiction or Bible allegories or anything like that. I think it's the weird moments of comedy in this show that really kept me in it, and they really write a lot based on from how bizarre John's parrot talk is, and I really like that, and I think that's what really like cinched this up for me as a show. I wanted to keep watching. That "it sounds Butchie" joke, it's so good.
There's two other lines of dialogue that I really enjoyed, as long as Rich is highlighting that one. I really like when Vietnam Joe pulls up to the motel and says to Luis Guzman Willie Garson, "I could eat a bowl of soup off of either of your heads."
Yeah, what does that mean?
That was a wild joke.
That's a wild thing to say to people you don't know. Also, just shout out to Sissy for when her husband is talking about thinking he has brain cancer and not knowing why he thinks that, just that he does. And she asks him, "What about the healing power of sex?" And then they have sex.
I do have grandparents do be fucking, so that it was nice to see that.
Also, it's nice to see her. I really know her from like Risky Business and this, so shout out to her there. Also, just shout out to Austin Nichols for doing really nice physical acting with what is a very difficult role to do. It reminds me of like a more avant-garde version of like Tom Hanks in Big, where it's just this kind of like boyish wonder at the world around him in a grown man's body, being able to mimic both the vocals and the mannerisms and physicality of a lot of different cast members. it is an interesting performance. I will give him credit on that.
There are a lot of other ways that this performance could be done. I'll give you that. And I think that the choices that were made by Austin Nichols were probably the right ones, given the script that he was handed. We talked about things we loved. Do we want to talk about some wait a minute moments? Because I feel like there are probably a few.
Oh, God. I mean, Ed O'Neill with just the racism and the homophobia stuff. Like
2 shows in a row.
Yeah, 2 weeks in a row. Guys, should we just do Married with Children next week? So we do 3 weeks in a row of Ed O'Neill's racism and homophobia?
Let's do the Ed O'Neill trilogy.
Any other wait a minute moments for you both?
It's just, this whole thing's just a lot. And I know that's not a specific at all, but there's just so many details layered upon each other. By the time we get to Cunningham being introduced at the motel, there's already so many plot lines and so many backstories trying to follow. This show just throws so much broad stroke information at you that by the time you get to that nice surfing moment as a family at the end, it almost feels like a relief. Not in that it's over, but like there's finally just one storyline here that feels like it's reaching a natural conclusion.
Yeah, to add to that, Max, watching this at the end of this episode, I felt exhausted. I felt like physically and mentally exhausted watching this television show. Like, the idea of like, obviously, 2007, this was before like binging TV shows one after the other, and that idea. If someone was like, let's binge John from Cincinnati, I'd be like, how do you have the energy for this? Like, it's way too much.
If you took out everything David Milch did and you just told me that a Yale literature professor wrote a show about Jesus and surfing, I'd be like, yeah, this is this.
Yeah.
Like, this is the show.
I really don't know. I'm gonna keep going with the sales pitches for people to watch all 10 episodes, but like you do get like, it gets deeper, it gets crazier. Like, it is just like, if you like shows like Lost or Twin Peaks or something like that, where you're just like, the whole point of the show is less about the entertainment factor and more about trying to figure out what the hell's going on, developing your own theories around it. Like, the only, because this show had such a short run, it was so unpopular, there's only like a handful of like actual fan pages online, and most of them are just fan theories about what they think happened, and that includes after the show had already finished. So, like, the only 10 episodes, it does not like answer every question, but neither did Lost. So I get it, like,
Yeah, very fair.
Yeah.
So if there aren't any more wait a minute moments, we do have an in-flight question, and my guess is whoever submitted this did not actually watch the pilot and read a little bit of a cursory item about what it was about. And they asked, if Jesus was in fact from the United States, what city would he be from?
Well, none of us is Mormon, so we know precisely where they think Jesus is from. I'm thinking Tampa, Florida. You gotta have humble beginnings for Jesus. Otherwise, it's not an important story. You guys can continue to discuss. I have my answer.
Jesus is from the Catskills in New York State.
Wow.
Because he's funny.
He's got a few jokes. He's got a few one-liners.
He worked the Borscht Belt for a long time and realized it wasn't for him, and then turned to healing and saving humanity.
Oh, I'm also going to add one more descriptor for why I think he's from Tampa, Florida. It's that he hung out with a lot of sex workers.
That's a good point.
It is the highest amount of strip clubs per capita in the United States.
Jesus,
okay,
Tampa,
so
baby.
I'm going to give a little backstory to my answer. I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio for a decent amount of time. And I don't think Cincinnati is a great representative of where Jesus would be from. Not that I think there's too much happening in Cincinnati, but I also don't think there's little enough happening in Cincinnati that it would make sense. But for those who are familiar with the Ohio region, because I know a few of our listeners are, there is a outlet mall area called the Cincinnati Premium Outlets in Monroe, Ohio. Yes, this continues to track with Cincinnati having things named Cincinnati but not being in Cincinnati.
Oh boy.
But a half a mile away from the Cincinnati Premium Outlets, there is a 30-foot high statue made of stone of Jesus Christ. It is
Wow.
literally amazing.
Wow.
I have a song that I sing every single time that I see Stone Jesus.
Big Stone Jesus.
Very close. It's Stone Jesus. He is made of stone. And so I would
Stone Temple Pontius Pilates.
So I will say I think Jesus would be from Monroe, Ohio, and I think he would have thrived in Monroe, Ohio. Well, thank you.
You would love the Bass Pro Shop pyramid.
Oh,
maybe it's from,
absolutely.
Maybe it's from Knoxville.
Would it be a Cabela's or would it be a Bass Pro Shop? We'll never know.
And I said, Jesus from Memphis.
Oh, yeah, Memphis. Memphis is from Memphis.
It's the third largest pyramid in the world.
Well, thank you so much for that in-flight question. We'll talk a little bit more about how to submit those later at the end of this episode, but I do want to talk a little bit about the show legacy. So Rich has mentioned it. There are only 10 episodes of John from Cincinnati that were ever made. The show was canceled right after the 10th episode premiered. You can also, if you do not find it on HBO Max, you might be one of the lucky few who has the 3-disc DVD set that was made available. One other thing that I want to talk about. So we talked a little bit about how this show premiered right after The Sopranos. There were 11.9 million folks who watched the season finale or series finale of The Sopranos. There were 3.4 who ended up staying for John from Cincinnati. What I will give kudos to is how many of those people who watched the premiere of John from Cincinnati stayed on to watch all of the rest of the show. It went from 3.4 million to 3 million, which is a pretty, decent
People
percentage.
came back.
So, Rich, you are not alone. People who watched it were like, give me more.
That's a really good retention over the season.
That is a wild retention.
Everybody wants more John, baby.
But surprisingly, no nominations for any awards for this show.
I'm stunned and angry. I want the Academy to come talk to me, because that's bullshit.
But Rich has a lot of questions that still remain. That is the legacy. I think everyone who probably watched this show has a lot of questions still about this show.
And if we're going to talk even showrunner legacy, David Milch then follows this up at HBO with a show called Luck starring Dustin Hoffman, which is most known for being shut down because they killed so many horses.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah, that premiered in 2011 or something?
2010 or 11. It was David Milch's horse racing show. He's like a big horse racing guy. He owns thoroughbreds and stuff. But they had so many horses that died doing the racing
Al
scenes.
Pacino in that show? Was it? No, it was Dustin Hoffman.
It's Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman was in that show.
This isn't even Milch's worst legacy at HBO. We've gone from Deadwood to John from Cincinnati
to dead horses.
You got shut down because so many horses died.
Oh my god.
It's time for Rich's Game of the Week. And we're also going to do on top of that, and thank you for sticking with us on this show, because I so desperately want other people to watch this entire series. I am going to do a personal giveaway for the pod. If you are listening, and we are going to post this on social media too, if you rate and review our podcast and send us a screenshot of it, you will be in the running to win a series DVD of John from Cincinnati. Brand new and sealed, and I will send it to you.
We're setting a terrible precedent that we're going to send DVD sets to people.
I don't know what machines still play DVDs, but I'm so excited to send this to our lucky winner. But for the three of us right now, I'm playing a little game called Who's That Familiar Face? And obviously we talked a little bit about Ed O'Neill being in last week's episode on Modern Family. I want you guys to tell me who of the Yost family, Sissy, Sean, Mitch, and Butchie, just so you know, to put those names to those characters. Rebecca DeMornay plays Sissy, Grayson Fletcher plays Sean, Bruce Greenwood plays Mitch, and Brian Van Holt plays Butchie. Which of these 4 actors have appeared in one of our previously done pilots shows? There's about 200 plus credits among the 4 of them, but I would love to... there's only 4 guesses, so I would love to hear what or who you think had been on a show we had previously covered.
And I'm assuming it's not the pilot of what we've previously covered.
You mean just physically?
They were in the show. There was surprisingly only one of them has a credit from the past shows that we've done.
Oh,
oh god, this is gonna drive me insane.
I'll go first, and I'll say that it was Mitch Yost played by Bruce Greenwood.
And do you have this isn't part of the game, but do you have a guess of what show he was on?
Oh, that's a dirty question.
We've only done 17 shows before that.
You know what? But they all were so memorable. I'd love if it was Bruce Greenwood was actually on Charlie Brown.
Yeah, Bruce Greenwood played Woodstock in the Charlie Brown.
I actually, now that I think about it, I really want Brian Van Holt to be on what was the one that we did with the Lions?
Oh my god, Father of the Pride?
Yeah, I want him to be on Father of the Pride so badly.
Max, what's your
Max,
guess?
what about you?
Okay, I think it is Brian Van Holt.
Okay.
And what show do you think?
So Van Holt, before this show, did a ton of action movies. He was in SWAT and Black Hawk Down and stuff like that. I think that Brian Van Holt is one of the characters in one of the movies that Vinny Chase made on Entourage. I think he's a character.
Max, you fucking got it. That is unbelievable.
Oh my god,
that is unbelievable.
I don't
How
remember.
Did you put that
I don't
together?
remember. I just when I was researching this, I knew that he was doing a lot of action movies in 03, 04, 05. He had supporting roles in a lot of stuff, and I was just what else could make sense at this time?
That was so good. I would have bet money before I came up with the game that Bruce Greenwood was in a show that we had done. He just seems like a...
Because he has so many credits.
Yeah, he literally does everything.
Yeah, he seems like a dad that would show up on the OC at some point, but also I'm so impressed that you got that. Not only the character, I'm sorry, the person,
but
the show, and the character that he got on Entourage is stunning to me.
Hold on, what's the movie he did though? Which one is he in?
Maybe he's in Medellin or something. I don't know.
I was gonna say if we ever do Saint Elsewhere, I'm gonna nail Bruce Greenwood.
No, he's one of Vinny Chase's co-stars in Smoke Jumpers.
Oh, okay. Speaking of Brian Van Holt, I really want to do Cougar Town at some point during the run.
Let's please do Cougar Town.
I love Cougar Town.
You, me, and Emil from Community all love
Cougar Town. Like and subscribe so Rich can send you a copy of Cougar Town in the future. There's going to be a lot more discs in that one.
more than one?
Rich is going to go broke sending DVD sets to people.
If anybody wants to sponsor this pod so we can support our DVD gifting habits.
That'd be great. Well, as we come to the end of this episode, I have my regular 2 questions for you both. Would you continue watching this show? And do you think it could be made today?
Well, I have a surprising answer to would you continue watching the show. Watch the rest of the fucking show. It is so good. Watch it. Please, for the love of God, someone else watch John from Cincinnati so I can talk about this
Rich
more.
needs someone to talk with.
It can't just be my brother and my dad again. Everyone needs to watch the show.
Max, what about you?
So I actually think this can be made today, 100%. I think a cryptic... mystery, surfing, all that stuff. I think that everything in this show could be made today. I think about stuff that Netflix did, like Maniac with Cary Fukunaga, that show with Emma Stone and Jonah Hill, which also only lasted 1 season. I think about Lost. I think about Twin Peaks having a revival. Absolutely, this show could be made today. If I say yes, I'm going to keep watching it. It's only to appease.
Rich is coming over to your house. He's going to watch it with you.
Listen, folks, Rich knows where I live, and if I don't watch the remaining 9 episodes, He's gonna just keep showing up at my building until I do.
He's gonna be gifting you DVD sets of John from Cincinnati.
I also own one of those eye-opening things from A Clockwork Orange, so I will make Max watch all this.
If I wasn't under the threat of Rich, I would not continue watching this, though.
So
it's just an example of a pilot where there's too much going on for me to really get absorbed into wanting to follow its storyline. It does that thing where a lot gets said, but nothing gets said. I don't know. It's just not for me. I'm really sorry, Rich.
That's okay.
So
the threat of violence will continue.
Rich, going into this recording, I was extremely upset with you.
Right.
To say,
I am mostly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but let me explain my thought process. Do I think this show could be made today? Not on HBO, because as we've seen, shows with confusing plot devices such as Westworld are now being taken off the platform entirely.
I mean, they gave Westworld way too long, in my opinion.
But
anyways.
that's my thing. Is I think if this show was edited differently and a couple of different choices were made, I think the show could actually thrive in today's, in a world that we live in right now. Like, I don't want to teenify the show and make it like Outer Banks or something like that, which is super popular. But we do need to sort of broaden the audience a little bit more because it almost feels like very niche. And I don't see a niche show like this thriving. Would I continue watching this show? Rich also knows where I live, but he's not nearly as close. So
no,
I will say this. Rich, I'll make you a promise. If you come and visit me, I will watch another episode of this show, and you can try to sell me on if I should continue watching the other 8 episodes after that. But
you've already watched 10% of it.
Oh my god. Until that moment in time, I might choose to watch another David Mitch show and watch Deadwood, because I think that's a fantastic show.
Just lightning quick in here, because you mentioned the teenifying thing, and we mentioned social media with the Sopranos finale earlier in this episode. I do wonder if a show like this that has so much cryptic speak and loose threads would benefit from the social era. I think about another HBO show that just wrapped its 2nd season, The White Lotus, and how it feels like in season 2 of that show, it became a social media phenomenon. There are so many threads and rabbit holes you can go down. People are finding minute details, even in the weeks since the finale aired, that they're still bringing to light. Like, we're still talking about theories there. I do wonder if a show like John from Cincinnati would have benefited from a culture of web blogging sites like AV Club and The Ringer and Uproxx that are so pop culture centric.
I think
if
this show came out while we were in school, like 2010 through 2013, where
we
Facebook
just missed.
Yeah, if it came out a few years later, I think that this show might have a 2nd season, and I'm going to say that very honestly. So, Rich, what could have been? But as the plane has landed, the seatbelt signs are off. Where can we find you two gentlemen?
You can find me watching the rest of John from Cincinnati in Los Angeles, California. Stop by the house and watch the rest with me. You can also find me on Instagram at Damn That's Rich. You can find Max and my comedy at Dadwagon Comedy on TikTok.
You could find me enjoying a nice bowl of Cincinnati chili, chili from Cincinnati. You can also find me on all things social media at Maxwell Singh.
And you can find me either in OTR Cincinnati, maybe the Banks, not enjoying a bowl of Cincinnati style chili because it's garbage. Shout out to MK. But maybe enjoying some Grater's ice cream. But you can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at RunJeffRun. You can find the TV Pilots License on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Pilots License. If you have a question about the show or for our next episode, shoot us an email or give us a call at 213-290-1713. If you rate and subscribe to the podcast and send a snapshot to Rich, you might be the proud new owner of a DVD set of John from Cincinnati. Make sure to watch out for our Instagram for previews of some of our upcoming episodes. And with that plane landed, the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then, surf's up.
California, here we come!
Recording stopped before the note ended.